Welcome to the Unity Guys Expert Interview Series. My name is Clayton Stenson, and I'll be your host today. This series is brought to you by Unity Guys Incorporated, where we help develop Unity within companies running on the entrepreneurial operating system. We do this through fractional integrator services and coaching for the visionary integrator. The reason I started this interview series is that I've met some pretty amazing and passionate people in recent years, and the conversations that we have been valuable to me. So I thought I should share them with other people to add value to them as well. So today's guest is Benj Miller. Benj is CEO of the operating system and Soul, and author of a great new book called Renegades. So welcome, Benj.
Thank you. Super glad to be here.
Awesome. So today we're going to chat a little bit about your 261.com website and some of the ideas that I've seen coming from you in recent days and months. And to start off, though, why don't you just tell us a little bit about 261.com and what you're doing, and then we'll dive into some of these ideas.
Sure. The 261 is nobody wants another email newsletter, but I was scratching my own itch to some degree because I had folders full of things like leadership tips, ideas, reminders, things we're supposed to do as leaders. And I felt like I was failing. Like I had all the answers right there, but how in the world are we supposed to do all these things, remember all these things? And so the things that had almost a rhythm to them, like for example, make sure you have your one-on-ones, deep conversations with all the people that work with you once a quarter. Those went on the calendar, and we took the name 261 is there's 261 working days in most business years, in most businesses, and so we plotted that across the year, these reminders, these tips, these questions that we need to be asking, things we need to be doing as leaders, so that we're not stuck trying to carry them all and carry them in our head, but we do have a little bit of, whether it's inspiration, motivation, reminder to do the things we need to do as a leader on an ongoing basis. So that's the 261. They're super short, consumable, because again, I wrote it for myself, and so my attention span's really short. I can only handle one little thought in as small of most concise way possible. So that's what that is, and we share it with thousands of leaders every day.
That's awesome. And I just want to jump right into the reason I asked you to do this interview. You posted about identity versus legacy, particularly in the visionary world. And because of what I do for the last 2 years, I've been really focused in on the visionary and integrator and what makes them do the things that they do, what makes them, not get along, what do I need to do to create an environment where they can get along. And what you posted about that topic was really interesting to me. So why don't you just kind of explain a little bit about what you posted, and then we'll dig into it a little deeper.
Yeah, and I'm like super energized that this, like, of all the 261 posts, this is probably the one that I get the most passionate about because it's been the most work for me. This is like I know this deeply because it is my battle. It's not because it came naturally. And so the post that you're reflecting on was about you can build a business that's about you, or build a business that has a legacy to it, and you can't do both. It's impossible to do both, because you're either building for yourself or you're building for someone or something. And the problem lies in this really comes down to an identity. And most people out there, including most leaders, have super fragile identities. My kids are in rec basketball right now. I have 4 kids playing rec basketball. So the carpool is in full effect right now. But I love sitting in the stands and watching the parents. And you can always tell who has like an only child out there, and their whole identity is wrapped up in that kid. And when that kid does something great, they feel so good about themselves. And when that kid does something, a little 9-year-old makes a mistake, their identity's at risk. Their child made a mistake in their youth, and they're out there trying. And for some reason, this parent has a negative reaction that is affecting them, right? That's what a fragile identity looks like. It's one of the easiest ways to see it. But we also see this in a a quarterly planning session when we're trying to work on something that pops up and isn't going the way that we seem, and we have those people that show up and they're really defensive. Why didn't this happen? Well, defensive. All that to me in my mind is a indicator that there's something going on at an identity level. So what are we actually talking about with identity? I think where we get this wrong most of the time is we try to, just like we're taught to go find your purpose in life, we're taught to go find our identity in life. And that's not the way that we were created. We were created so that our identity would be ascribed to us by somebody that we admire, that we know loves us. And I think in a perfect world, this would be our fathers. Our fathers would, we would admire, they'd be admirable people, which unfortunately they're not all, and they would love us. And unfortunately they don't love us. And even in their love these days, it's very rare for a father to be thinking about ascribing a positive identity to their son or daughter. So that doesn't usually work. It's very, very rare that that actually plays out. Well, I know you and I share this common relationship with the Heavenly Father. And our Heavenly Father, who created us, absolutely loves us. And we should admire him because he's perfect, right? And so he has a lot to say about who we are as sons and daughters, as heirs to his kingdom, as his bride. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to get into scripture, is to like absorb that identity, to inherit that identity. And in scripture, it's a very kind of there's a almost universal identity as a child of God. But there's also a personal identity, right? So this is where, spending time in listening prayer and in community with people that know you and can speak into you and prophesy over you and speak words of encouragement over you is so important, because it reins in that personal identity of why did God create you, and what did he put you here to do? And I know for me, I just got back from a leadership event this morning. CEO hosts it, who is literally one of the greatest leaders I know. But I know that walking into his presence, especially walking into his office, man, my comparison triggers pop all over the place because he is freaking awesome. And I have to remind myself that, like, he is awesome. And so am I. And he is wired one way, and I am wired a different way. And like, comparison's the thief of all joy. And I've got to make sure that I'm in there solid on my identity. So the first part of identity is, where are we getting our identity? Like who gets to sign our report card is the metaphor that I like to use, right? Like, who's actually ascribing how you're doing. And then the second part's how are we getting graded on that report card? And so this will be a fun conversation. I'm interested in your take on this, but I think that we know innately deep inside of us that our report card is signed based on performance. But if we get into a lot of evangelical thinking, new age thinking, we try and push that off to not be based on performance. It's on something bigger, greater. How could it be stable, not fragile, if it's based on my own performance? Because I let myself down all the time. I do not meet my own expectations. Yeah. So if it's on performance, then it's fragile, right? So this is the magic of everything around identity, is I think that it is based on performance, but my report card got filled out based on somebody else's performance. Mm-hmm. And so if my identity, I've done all the work on this. This is about the only topic where I will say that I've done all the work. And there's all the work still more to do. But the thing that I know is that there's no other stable answer to my identity than allowing my report card to be filled out based on Jesus's work on the cross. That's the only, everything else falls down, because if it's my performance, it doesn't work. And if it's on how somebody else is feeling about me in that moment, it doesn't work. It's just fragile. And when we see leaders show up with fragile identities, then it has to be about them, because they're trying to figure out where they fit, why they matter, who likes me, who doesn't like me, am I successful? Is my bank account filled? Am I, all of these things rattle around our heads. So that's where the magic comes from. I had my coach about, it's probably been a decade ago. I was in the absolute lowest season of my personal and professional career. And we were sitting together one morning, and he looked at me and kind of tapped the table as he does and says, "Benj, at the end of the day, you have to be able to answer 3 questions. Who am I? Why do I matter? And who is my audience?" And that's the beginning of where this journey started from me, that I realized, and Clayton, here's the crazy thing. Like, I'm a brand guy. I do identity for companies. I do identity for other people. And I hadn't done the work for myself, right? Cobbler's children had no shoes. And in that moment, I realized that I had inadequate answers to all 3 of those. Um,
Wow, that's
so
powerful.
all that said, it's still a journey every day
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
replace my identity in that place, so that I can walk into an organization and it not be about me. It's I'm literally showing up there for the people that I get to interact with, for the people that I get to lead,
Mm-hmm.
and help them building up and encouraging their identities.
Yeah. This really reminds me of, and I know you know him, Tim Spiker, uh,
Yeah.
and his work, and him and I interviewed him for this as well recently, and we talked about self forgetfulness, and how I've noticed, and I didn't have this term before I had this talk with Tim, but I've noticed that I am most effective in my role as a coach, as a integrator, as a leader, when I am able to put myself completely aside, and like he
Mhm.
called it, self forgetfulness. But
Interesting.
I find the only way I can do that is when my identity is in the
Yeah. Yeah.
right, because otherwise I'm insecure. I'm wondering, am I going to be able to add any value here? Am I going to be able to impact this person? Is this person better than me? Right? Who am I
Yeah.
but if I can just put all that aside and just forget about me and be 100% focused on Bench or
Yeah.
whoever is in
Yeah.
front of me, and yeah, and all that other junk which has gotten in the way in my life in the past, that you're talking about. So yeah, it's been a beautiful, probably the last couple of years. I feel like I've really learned how to do that, and guard against not doing it.
Yeah.
become
Yeah.
become aware, like when I come into a meeting, or just before a meeting, sometimes that voice starts to come in, and I'm like, no, I know who I am. God help
Yeah.
me, to be present and let go of myself and just be here for this person, show up fully for them.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm reminded that, when I went through the journey to answer those 3 questions, my coach said it, look, I was struggling in that moment. He had to like literally hold my hand through those 3 questions, but he said, it's easier if we take them in reverse order. So we started with, who is your audience? I got to my Heavenly Father pretty quick in my head, because no, first of all, I didn't want to give the church answer because I was so like demoralized at that moment. But in
Mm-hmm.
my logical thinking, nothing else worked. It all fell short. So why do I matter? Long conversation. And then the third piece was, who am I? Well, if you answer that, it's an I am statement, right? And I think that that's where we get into a lot of trouble. That's where, God's the ultimate badass when he says, I am that I am. Like, he doesn't have to finish the statement, but we're not him. And so who are you? Well, I am what? I am who? And how we answer that's really important. Most of us fill it in with adjectives like, I'm an integrator, I'm an operator, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a father, I'm a whatever. And again, those things can disappear overnight. You know,
Mhm.
that story can change very, very quickly. So, anchoring like this morning to your point, to my example about walking in this morning, I think having the right answer in that becomes and one of those like affirmations, like you remember Stuart Smalley, like I'm good enough, I'm smart enough,
Yeah, I
and
remember
gosh darn
Michael
it, people
Jordan
like
doing
me.
that on Saturday Night Live.
Yes, 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 100%. And I think like it's so, so cheesy, but I think that there's something very real and very powerful in that. First of all, our words, I love, do you know what abracadabra means?
No, I don't think so.
It means to create as I speak. I speak and I create. We speak things into life. It's a very it's funny because it's magic, right? But it's a very spiritual word that this, and so I think the same thing happens when we say I am blank. And when we say that, whatever we fill that in with, we are creating our own identity. We're locking it in. So for this morning, walking in, I had to say that to myself a few times. I am this. I'm not that guy. He's awesome. Like I don't have to take anything away from him. I don't have to think anything negative of him. Again, it's not like we've got to get away from comparison. Comparison just tries to sneak
Yeah.
in everywhere. And to remind myself who I am gave me the foundation to walk in there with confidence
Yeah, and I think our culture pushes comparison constantly, which is not helpful.
constantly.
Um, so I want to bring this back to the, well, what would you call it? The visionary operator relation.
Sure, sure.
And if you guys, if people are listening, don't know what System Soul is, you should check it out. These guys are gradually winning me over. Um, so back to that relationship, when we get it wrong, I'd like to talk about that. As a
Yeah.
visionary, when you get it wrong, what is the consequence of it? When you don't have it, when you're focused on
Yeah.
identity rather than legacy.
Yeah. And this is what a lot of the book is about because what
Yeah, yeah,
happens is early in a organization, it has to be about that founder.
yeah.
Like there's just so much that is founder centric in the beginning. And it honestly, if you're really smart as a founder, early first 10 hires, they're all a bunch of doers, right? Like people that can execute, people that can build and take your ideas and go execute. What's happening in that is that we're getting accustomed to, I say we because I've done this over and over and over as an entrepreneur, but we get accustomed to being the person with the ideas, being the person that makes the decision, being the person that directly leads the people. And all of those are necessary in the beginning and will absolutely impede your ability to grow and scale once you're past that kind of first
Mm-hmm,
phase.
mm-hmm.
And some of like for me in my story back to when I was, had that moment with my coach, I had the year before we grew 300%. And then we had the rug pulled out of our organization. Like revenue dropped off, sales channel dropped off. I was burning an immense amount of cash almost immediately. I had stumbled into entrepreneurship, so I had no idea what I was really doing from a business building standpoint. Um, so I had those labels ripped off me. I had allowed creative, entrepreneur, leader, successful, all these things become the I am statements, right? And those got ripped out and I didn't know who I was anymore. And so the entrepreneurial journey to go from you are the decision maker, you are the idea person, you are the creator, you are the leader, and not allowing that to become your identity or if you already have to remove that from your identity, and that's part of the process. When I coach a team who doesn't have an operator in our language, integrator in your language, in the business, I think that that is mostly me coaching the psychology of that transition because it's an identity type conversation of where does your value as the entrepreneur come from? Because we need that entrepreneur energy. We're not graduating out of it. We're not asking them to grow up and mature so that the business can mature. We just need a few shifts in the mentality there. And all of it comes down to perspective.
Mm-hmm. So how does it? So let's say, we moved forward a little bit in the journey, and now we have an operator integrator working with us. if we're still struggling to release that, switch from identity to legacy, what do you think? What challenges do you see in that relationship? And then I'd also like to talk about from the integrator's perspective, but go ahead.
Um, well, you can probably tell us better from the integrator's perspective. I know it makes it a challenge for the operator of that business to really leverage all of their gifts and skills and talents when they're basically hamstrung by that visionary. Um, that's the thing that I see the most. Um, Obviously that operator could show up with their own set of issues and
Yeah.
identity struggles.
And they
Uh,
do realistically.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's you, and if both of them have that, now you're in an ego fight tension, and this is primal. So it feels like survival. It feels like our lives are being threatened in some of these tensions, which is hilarious if we sit here and joke about it, but it's very, very real. It's a level deeper than emotional. I don't know what that is, maybe just primal,
Mhm.
but it's a level deeper in our DNA.
Mhm.
And we go into protect mode. We're trying to protect ourselves, trying to
Mhm.
protect the organization, protect what we've built, all of these things,
Yeah.
which are not bad, but we tend to take that negativity and react in a negative
Mhm.
way.
Mhm. Yeah, I've been, so I'm in my eighth VI duo now. I've coached, more than a dozen of them as well. But I've seen, I like how you put it, the hamstrung, right? It's like, come on, like I've seen it work really well.
Yeah.
And I would say the first EOS visionary that I worked with, uh, his identity, he was also a person of faith, right? And his identity was not wrapped up in his business. And he
Mm,
was able to let go of the vine and let me run it. And we had a high level of trust
yeah.
because I was a pastor prior to working with him, and he attended the church, right? So he knew me, he knew my abilities, he knew he knew that I could do the integrator role and do it well. So he let go, right?
Yeah.
And it was incredible. And I don't think I really realized how special that was.
Yeah.
I do now, right? Because I've worked with others where that transition is not easy, right?
And
And
as you look back on those, do you, does this play out like through an identity lens?
oh yeah, absolutely, right? Because, and I would say it's particularly in the letting go of the vine thing, because if my value as a visionary, and I'm just putting myself in that role, and I kind of am in
Yeah.
my own
Yeah.
business now, right? If my value has been coming from my contribution and my, me being the center of it all, and now you're asking me to not be anymore, you're asking me to
Yeah.
just be part of it,
Yeah.
right? Like an important, crucial part of it,
Yeah.
but not all of it, right?
And
And
that's the most common question when they can actually articulate it is, well, where do I create value for this organization then? Right. And so they're struggling with, their own elevation in their career to that next level. And the answer is different for everybody because they all have different, unique abilities, unique geniuses that they're bringing into the organization. So
yeah,
they got to figure that out.
yeah. And I think my first EOS visionary, he bought another company, right? So, he was able to go and be that guy again in
Yep.
another company, right? And release this one to me to run it.
Mhm.
And he could still add value, his network added value, and he definitely still had a lot of opportunities to weigh in on situations where we needed him. But he was able to go and do what he did in the early days with the company that I was working for in a new company.
Yeah.
So I think that happens quite often too, where visionaries end up owning multiple companies, and they can go and do it again somewhere else.
Well, I've found that in my own organization. The business that I built couldn't handle all of me and all the time. And that feels weird to say, but it wasn't a business we were going to grow and scale to 100 million, right? So like I needed for the health of myself and the organization, I needed a few other irons in the fire and to divide that energy.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Because yeah, the if the energy doesn't have an outlet, I think it creates problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the book, we use the term like, visionaries are fire starters, and we absolutely need that. But a visionary out of control is an arsonist, and they will burn down their own organization.
Yeah, and I think about it like if I bring that back to my own family, I have three boys. They're 7, 5, and 3, and they have a ton of energy. But you can tell when they've been cooped up in the house and not been able to run, right? Because they're just wrecking stuff, right? They're fighting, they're jumping off the couches like they're just wild animals. You let them outside and let them run, right? And they just go crazy.
Yeah.
And then but then they calm down. And I think it's, I don't mean that visionaries are children, but it's a very similar, you
Kind
know,
of.
it's a very similar thing. Like you need a healthy outlet for the energy, right? And yeah, so I think sometimes having multiple irons in the fire is good for that.
I
Um,
think in a lot of ways, that's interesting that you said that. In a lot of ways, I do think that a lot of the great visionaries refuse to grow up. And I don't mean that in like a maturity way, but
yeah,
I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine is the CEO. She literally started like almost entry level in this organization, and now leads 100 plus people. But when her board put her in that CEO spot, she had been COO. CEO left. She got the job. Um, Her board literally like bought her a handbag that was like Louis Vuitton or something and said, "Hey, you should really drive this car." And she had a new coach as the CEO, and he kept talking to her about being presidential and what that looks like and this and that. And I was just listening to her one day and I was like, you know, I don't think you got this job because you're presidential. I
mm,
think you got this job because of the way that you care about and lead people. And that was so freeing for her because we have these societal, cultural, Harvard Business Review, influences telling us all the way we're supposed to grow up to be this like idealized version of whatever we're trying to be. Just like me going this morning and seeing this other CEO, like there's part of me that thinks that's what a leader looks like, right?
right, right.
Um, and so I think, well, I had a moment early in my career where like I kind of got my business to a stable place, and for a couple of years, I went through this season where like I'm gonna hire a fashion person to do my wardrobe and whatever, and I had some nice shirts and suits, and one day I woke up, I'm like, wait a minute, I never wanted to wear a suit. Like, why when I made it, air quotes made it, did I put on a suit? And that day I'm like, I'm never gonna wear a collared shirt, pressed collared shirt a day in my life unless I absolutely want to. Right. So like it's almost like I love when people have a little almost hostility toward cultural norms. And I think that there is a childlike aspect to that. Like, hey,
Yeah,
just we don't have to grow up in all the ways that we're
yeah,
being told to grow up.
yeah, yeah. I find that's something I'm very aware of with my children. Like I don't want to try to box them in, to behaving in a certain way. Like there's obviously limits to
Yeah.
that, right? I want to free their spirit to be who God made them to be, right? And but I also have to be careful that my identity. I can't do that very well if my identity is wrapped up in their behavior, right? So
Oh yeah. Oh
right,
yeah.
it's like I have people over, and it's like, man, you guys. Right, so it's a balancing act, but anyway, uh just quickly, I know we're running out of time here, but legacy, I think, for me, and I'd love your thoughts on this too, when we rise above identity and become about developing people, and leaving an impact and maybe raising up that next visionary, right? Or
Right.
raising up that
Right.
next, like that's really what lights my fire,
Yes.
and I love being a fractional integrator in some ways because I'm preparing them for not needing me anymore,
Yeah.
right? My success is
Yep.
how quickly can they do it without me,
Yes. Exactly.
right? And if I finish in 6 months, that's a bigger win than if it takes 12, right? So that's what
100%.
I love about that. And so tell me a little bit about legacy, and then we'll wrap up. Like,
Oh, you just nailed it. Like, if it's all about you, then you can't be looking to leave, right? So you hit it exactly. As I look back on my own career, my biggest moments of fulfillment is where I took somebody, saw something in them, and raised them up to lead in ways that they never imagined. Like
mhm,
that, done. I'm out, right? Like, and that will live on long past me. You can leave a mark on an organization, you can leave a mark on an industry, but leaving a legacy is about not just impacting the people that you touched, but having them impact all the people that they're going to touch. It's got to be multi-layered. That's where the legacy comes in.
mhm,
And it can't matter that, you know, new CEO that just replaced me. It's not about those new employees that report to them knowing my name. It's about them being positively affected by the person that's now in charge. Like that's legacy. That's what we should be driving for. And
mhm.
how many of those people can we create uh, in the places that we get to touch?
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome. And I just want to say and give you some feedback. I saw it when you were on Christ Centered Second in Command Network and you had Mackenzie on with you. I could see how intentional you were being to do that with
Mm,
her, right? Like you were giving her opportunities, bringing her into the limelight. I could see it, and that you're a great example of that in that context. So that's
thank
awesome
you. Yeah.
and awesome. So I know we're pretty much out of time, but I just want to thank you because this is great, and I look forward to more conversations in the years.
Yeah. Well, you got a topic where I think I used more words in the last half hour than I use in a week. So uh, you got
So
me riled up.
So if someone wants to learn more about you and your coaching, the book, 261.com, how do
Yeah,
they?
the 261 is a great kind of landing page because you can sign up for that daily reminder. From there, you should be able to find System Install, my LinkedIn, the new book, Renegades. It's
Yeah,
easy to find
it's
on
it's a
Amazon.
it's a great book. I'm really
Thank you.
impressed by it. So thank you for bringing that to the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on behalf of our viewers, thank you again for joining, and thanks for sharing your passion for this topic. I'm sure it's going to have an impact. And if today's interview added value to you, please subscribe to this channel for future interviews with experts in the world of business.